6 Minute English.
From BBC Learning English.
Hello and welcome to 6 Minute English. I'm Neil. This is the programme where in just 6 minutes we discuss an interesting topic and teach some related English vocabulary. And joining me to do this is Rob.
Hello.
In this programme, we're discussing Schadenfreude.
Hold on, Neil. Schadenfreude. That's a German word.
Schadenfreude is what we call a loan word, a word from one language that is used in another language without being changed.
So you're right. Schadenfreude is used in English. And am I right in thinking it describes the satisfying feeling you get when something bad happens to someone else?
You're absolutely right, Rob. Imagine you're in a queue at the supermarket and someone pushes in, but when they got to pay, their credit card doesn't work. Think of the feeling you might get just seeing their misfortune. Another word for bad luck.
Yes, that is a very satisfying feeling, but it's quite a mean feeling too.
It is, but we'll be discussing why that feeling could actually be good for us. But first, let's set a question for you, Rob, and our listeners at home to answer. This is about false cognates, also called false friends. Words that look the same in two languages but have different meanings. So in English, we have the word rat, but what does that mean in German? Is it A, a big mouse, B, annoyed, or C, advice?
That's tricky because I don't speak German, so I'll guess and say B, annoyed.
Well, I'll have the answer later on. Now, let's talk more about Schadenfreude. Enjoying someone's misfortune can certainly make us feel good.
And studies have shown this feeling is quite normal, particularly when it happens to someone we envy. If we see a wealthy celebrity suffering on a reality TV show or are exposed for not paying their taxes, we feel good. We say they've had their comeuppance.
That's a good word, meaning a person's bad luck that is considered to be deserved punishment for something bad that they've done.
Let's hear from psychologist Wilco van Dijk from the University of Leiden, who's been talking about this on the BBC Radio 4 programme All in the Mind. What have his studies found about our enjoyment of others' misfortune?
People especially feel Schadenfreude when they think the misfortune is deserved. Then the question is where this joy arises. Is this actually joy experienced towards the misfortunes of others, or is it also at least partly joy about a just situation? Is that this misfortune of another actually appeals to a sense of justice? That's also the reason why we like the misfortunes of hypocrites. Because if they fall down, that also is a deserved situation.
Okay, so Wilco van Dijk's studies found we get joy when someone's misfortune is deserved. There is justice. In other words, the punishment someone receives is fair.
And a just situation means a fair situation. It's right. So I guess he's saying we're not just being mean.
Yes, and he also mentioned the type of people whose misfortune is just and deserved are hypocrites. People who claim to have certain moral beliefs but actually behave in a way that shows they are not sincere.
The All in the Mind programme also heard from another expert on the subject, author and historian of emotions, Dr. Tiffany Watt-Smith. She talked about how Schadenfreude is a subjective thing, based on our feelings, and it's not as simple as deciding what is right or wrong. What word does she use that means to express sympathy to someone about someone's bad luck?
We don't really experience emotions, as either or things. It's not black or white. I think it's perfectly reasonable that we could genuinely commiserate with someone else's misfortune at the same time as a terrible sly smile spreading across our lips because, something that we've envied about them has turned out to not work out so well or whatever it is. We have a much deeper ability to hold contradictory emotions in mind, much more so than your average moral philosopher would allow.
Interesting stuff. She says when something goes wrong for someone, we have the ability to commiserate with them. That's the word for expressing sympathy to someone about their bad luck.
So overall, Tiffany Watt-Smith thinks we have a range of emotions when we experience Schadenfreude. But these are contradictory emotions, different and opposite emotions. Maybe, Neil, we should just be nicer people.
No way. I loved seeing Germany getting knocked out of last year's World Cup. Not really. Talking of Germany, earlier we mentioned false friends, and I asked, in English, we have the word rat, but what does that mean in German? Is it A, a big mouse, B, annoyed, C, advice? And Rob, you said
I said be annoyed.
And that is the wrong answer, I'm afraid. The right answer is C, advice. Well done if you knew that at home. Now on to the vocabulary we looked at in this programme.
So today we've been talking about Schadenfreude. That describes the satisfying feeling you get when something bad happens to someone else.
And that's an example of a loan word, a word from one language that is used in another language without being changed, in this case, German.
We mentioned comeuppance, which describes a person's misfortune that is considered to be deserved punishment for something bad that they've done.
Next, we mentioned justice. That's the punishment someone receives that is fair for what they've done. And the word just describes something that is fair and right.
Hypocrites are people who claim to have certain moral beliefs, but actually behave in a way that shows they're not sincere.
And finally, commiserate is a word that means expressing sympathy to someone about their bad luck. That's the verb. The noun form is commiseration.
Well, commiserations, Neil. We've run out of time for this programme. See you soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
6 Minute English.
From BBC Learning English.
Hello, this is 6 Minute English from BBC Learning English. I'm Neil.
And I'm Georgina.
This is the programme where we hope to add some colour to your life by talking about an interesting subject and teaching you some useful vocabulary.
And colour is what we're talking about today. What's your favourite colour, Neil?
Oh, I like green. A fresh, bold colour that reminds me of nature. It can have a calming effect. And you?
It's got to be blue. It reminds me of the sea, the sky and holidays, of course.
Colour, no matter which one we prefer, affects how we feel. And we'll be talking about that soon. But not before I challenge you to answer my quiz question, Georgina, and it's a science question. Do you know what the splitting of white light into its different colours is called? Is it A, dispersion, B, reflection, or C, refraction?
Well, I'm not a scientist, so I'll have to guess as C, refraction.
OK, I'll reveal the right answer later on. But now, let's talk more about colour. Colour can represent many different things, depending on where you come from. You can be green with envy, wishing you had what someone else had.
And someone can feel blue, so feel depressed. We choose colours to express ourselves in what we wear or how we decorate our home.
The BBC Radio 4 programme, You and Yours, has been talking about colour and whether it affects everyone's mood. Karen Haller is a colour psychologist and a colour designer and consultant. She explained how colour affects us.
It's the way that we take in the wavelengths of light, because colour is wavelengths of light, and it's how that comes in through our eye. And then it goes into the part of our brain called the hypothalamus, which governs our sleeping patterns, our hormones, our behaviours, our appetite. It governs everything. And so different colours and different frequencies or different wavelengths of light, we have different responses and different reactions to them.
So, colour is wavelengths of light. A wavelength is the distance between two waves of sound or light that are next to each other. As these wavelengths change, so does the colour we see.
Thanks for the science lesson. Karen also explained that there's a part of our brain that controls. She used the word govern, how we feel and how we behave, and this can change depending on what colour we see.
Interesting stuff. Of course, colour can affect us differently. Seeing red can make one person angry, but someone else may just feel energised.
Homeware and furnishing manufacturers offer a whole spectrum or range of colours to choose to suit everyone's taste and mood. But during the recent coronavirus pandemic, there was a rise in demand for intense, bright shades and patterns. This was referred to as happy design, design that was meant to help lift our mood.
Yes, and Karen Haller spoke a bit more about this on the You and Yours programme.
In the time when everyone was out and we were all working and we'd led very, very busy lives, quite often what people wanted, they wanted a very quiet sanctuary to come back to. So they had very pale colours or very low chromatic colours in their house, low saturation, because that helped them unwind, it helped them relax and to feel very soothed. But what I have found since the first lockdown is a lot of people, because they're not getting that outside stimulation, they're actually putting a lot of brighter colours in their home because they're trying to bring in that feeling that they would have got when they were out, that excitement and that buzz.
It seems that in our normal busy working lives, our homes were peaceful places and somewhere to relax. They were a sanctuary. To create this relaxing space, we use pale colours, ones that lack intensity like sky blue.
But during the recent lockdowns, when we weren't outside much, we tried to get that stimulation, that excitement or experience, by decorating our homes with brighter colour, such as yellow.
Perhaps a little too bright for me. It's all about personal taste and the connections we make with the colours we see, but it makes sense that brighter colours can certainly lift our mood.
Now, earlier I asked you, Georgina, do you know what the splitting of white light into its different colours is called? Is it A, dispersion, B, reflection, or C, refraction?
And I said it was refraction.
Sorry, Georgina, that's wrong. It's actually called dispersion. Back to school for you, but not before we recap some of today's vocabulary.
Okay, firstly we can describe someone who wishes they had what someone else has as being green with envy.
We also talked about a wavelength, the distance between two waves of sound or light that are next to each other.
To govern means to control or influence.
A sanctuary can be a peaceful or relaxing place. In some cases, it can be a safe place for someone in danger.
Stimulation describes the feeling of being excited, interested or enthused by something. And pale describes a colour that lacks intensity. It's not very bright, and for me, they're much better than a bold, bright yellow.
Well, Georgina, thanks for showing your true colours. That's all for now, but we'll be picking another topic to discuss out of the blue next time.
Don't forget you can hear other 6-minute English programmes and much more on our website at bbclearningenglish.com. And we're always posting stuff on our social media platforms. Bye for now.
Goodbye.
6-minute English.
From BBC Learning English.
Hello, this is 6-minute English from BBC Learning English. I'm Sam.
And I'm Neil.
Neil, would you describe yourself as a numbers person?
If you mean, am I someone who understands numbers and is good at using them and interpreting data, then no.
Okay, so maybe you're like me. You weren't good at maths at school?
No, I wasn't. Algebra, geometry, times tables, it was all very confusing.
Yeah, we're not alone, Neil. But the fear of numbers might just be in our heads, and we might have enough number knowledge to get by with. That's what we'll be exploring in this programme while looking at some relevant vocabulary. But, sorry Neil, I'm going to start with a maths question. It's thought the largest number in the world is called a googol. It's written with a 1 and how many zeros? Is it A, 100 zeros, B, 1,000 zeros, or C, 10,000 zeros?
I'll guess 10,000 zeros.
Okay, I'll reveal the answer later on. But let's talk more about the fear of numbers now. Of course, numbers are important in our lives, but one bad experience at school can put us off them for life. Put off means make someone dislike something.
What put me off maths was it was not only complicated but very theoretical, not very practical, useful for real-life situations. And the problem now is it's easy to be fooled by fancy figures that we get told about.
This is something the Y Factor programme on BBC World Service has been exploring. They spoke to Charles Seif, who's an author and professor at New York University, who explained why we're at the mercy of people who throw numbers at us.
Because we are primed not to question numbers, certain people have learned that numbers are perhaps the most powerful tools for deception. Advertisers, marketers, politicians who try to convince the public through spurious oratory have learned that the one thing that they can't get challenged on is numbers, or a challenge is ineffective.
Interesting words from Charles Seif there. He explains that numbers might be a powerful tool for deceiving people. Many of us are primed, so told to behave in a certain situation and in a certain way, not to question numbers, accept them as fact.
Yes, and this is dangerous. So when politicians, for example, do good and effective public speaking, known as oratory, the information they give could be spurious. That means false, not correct or inaccurate. But numbers are more persuasive. They make you believe something is true.
So, unless you're confident with numbers, you're unlikely to challenge the facts and figures that you're given. So, Sam, if I said to you that 10% of the 10 million people who eat meat have a 20% chance of being 5% overweight, would you challenge that?
I'd have to go away and work that out. As I said, Neil, I'm not a numbers person. Even talking about numbers makes me anxious.
Well, interestingly, the Y Factor program explained that girls are more anxious about learning maths. But even if they feel more nervous about maths, they aren't any worse with numbers than their more confident classmates. It's just the fear that's stopping you.
Well, maybe, but one bad experience can knock our confidence and ability to use maths.
Take comfort from Paula Miles, who teaches statistics to psychology students at St Andrews University. She told the Y Factor that she thinks there's no such thing as a numbers person.
There is no such thing as someone who's a number person or not. If we're taught in the right way, then I think we all have the potential to be a numbers person. I'm not saying we're all going to grow up to be mathematicians, but we're all going to get to a point where we have the basic numeracy skills that we need to be able to cope in our environment.
I feel a little better now. We all have the possibility within us, or potential, to be a numbers person.
Yes, I think it's about survival. We want to develop numeracy, basic mathematical skills, to use numbers in a particular situation that we're in. We might not be a genius like Einstein, but we know enough to work things out.
I wonder if you worked out the answer to my question correctly, Neil. Earlier I asked about what's thought to be the largest number in the world, called a googol. How many zeros does it have? 100 zeros, 1,000 zeros, or 10,000 zeros?
I said 10,000 zeros.
Sorry, Neil. A googol is 10 to the 100th power, so a mere 100 zeros.
I don't think I'll be using that number anytime soon, but I might be using some of the vocabulary we've discussed today, including a numbers person.
That's someone who understands numbers and is good at using them and interpreting data, not like us.
If you're put off something, it means you are made to dislike something. And to be primed means to behave in a certain situation.
The skill of effective public speaking is known as oratory, and spurious means false, inaccurate, or not correct.
And when we have the possibility within us to do something, we describe it as our potential, and having numeracy means having basic mathematical skills.
But now we've reached the number 6 minutes of English. Thanks very much for listening. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
6 Minute English.
From BBC Learning English.
Hello, this is 6 Minute English from BBC Learning English. I'm Rob.
And I'm Georgina.
In this programme, we're looking for utopia.
You mean a perfect world? A place where everyone lives together in harmony? Does that kind of place exist, Rob?
Probably not, but it's something we aspire to create. A happy place where everyone is cared for and nobody goes without.
Well, let me know if you find it and I'll head there straight away.
Well, one place that is trying to be like that is the Dutch city of Amsterdam. We're going to be finding out what they're doing with the help of some donuts. But first, Georgina, I have a perfect question for you. According to the 2020 United Nations World Happiness Report, which country is the world's happiest? Is it A, Finland, B, Singapore, or C, Austria?
That's tricky, but I imagine that if only for the scenery, it's A, Finland.
OK, Georgina, I'll tell you if you are right or wrong later on. Anyway, let's get back to Amsterdam, a city that's doing its best to use creative ideas to be sustainable.
That's right, and it's using the concept of a ring donut to use as a model for its sustainability. Economist Kate Raworth, who we will hear from shortly, describes this as a picture of 21st century prosperity for humanity.
Now, thinking of this ring donut, the idea is not to leave anyone in the hole in the middle falling short on the essentials of life, but at the same time not going beyond the outer ring, because there we put so much pressure on our planetary home it can cause climate change. So, here is Kate Raworth speaking on the BBC World Service programme People Fixing the World, talking about how Amsterdam is trying to fit into this donut approach.
Amsterdam has started with a goal of saying we want to be a thriving, inclusive, regenerative city for all residents while respecting planetary boundaries. That's like saying we want our city to live in the donut. And that changes how you build. You don't bring in more new raw materials from across the other side of the world. You say, right, how do we reuse the construction materials that are already in our city to build new buildings? How do we change the way that people travel? Start asking very different questions from the outdated economic mindset that they were taught before.
Interesting stuff from Kate Raworth there. The people of Amsterdam are trying to live within the donut. Their aim is to live and look after each other without harming the planet. It's a big aim, but they want their city to be thriving, so growing and being successful.
And it wants to be inclusive, including everyone and treating them equally. This is beginning to sound like utopia, Rob. To achieve this, Kate talked about using locally sourced materials for building and thinking about how people travel around, basically making it a sustainable city.
It's about people thinking differently and not doing things in the same way they've always been done. It involves changing the way people think, or their mindset.
Another idea from the Netherlands that fits the donut model is the making of recycled jeans. The People Fixing the World programme visited a company where old jeans were mixed with new organic cotton to make new ones.
The new ones might not be affordable for everyone, but they do reduce cotton production and the use of chemicals and water. The process creates jobs too.
Well, let's hear from Bert van Son, CEO of Mud Jeans. Listen to why he tries to work within the donut model.
If you take the donut economy and you see the inside of the circles, if you break that boundary, mistreat people, and you have people making your jeans, but they don't have any social security or any liberty or any medical care or those kind of things, you will never be able to make nice jeans. It has to become human again, making clothing.
Bert van Son sees the benefit of the donut economy by treating people fairly and with respect. The opposite is to mistreat. He thinks they should have things such as social security, a payment system by governments that helps people live a reasonable life.
And he says you can't make nice jeans without being human. He doesn't just mean being a person, but being someone with compassion, feelings and respect for others.
All this from a donut. Hopefully this will lead to a happier city and country. But for now, what is the happiest country in the world, Georgina?
Yes, you asked me earlier, according to the 2020 United Nations World Happiness Report, which country has been named the world's happiest? And I said Finland. Come on, make me happy and tell me I'm right.
Well, happily, you are correct. Well done. Finland is top of the list for the third year in a row, with Denmark coming in second. But before you head off there, we need to recap some of the vocabulary we've discussed today.
Of course, we've been discussing utopia, a perfect place where everyone lives together in harmony.
Thriving describes something that is growing and successful, and inclusive means including everyone and treating them equally.
We also mentioned mindset. That describes the fixed thoughts and attitudes someone has.
To mistreat someone is to treat them badly or cruelly.
And social security is a payment system by governments that helps people live a reasonable life.
OK, well that's all for this programme. We'll see you again soon for more trending topics and vocabulary here at 6 Minute English. Bye for now.
Bye.
6 Minute English.
From BBC Learning English.
Hello, this is 6 Minute English from BBC Learning English. I'm Sam.
And I'm Neil.
Have you heard this joke, Neil? Question: what's a rat's favourite game?
I don't know, Sam. What is a rat's favourite game?
Hide and squeak.
Very funny.
Well, I'm glad you're laughing because, as we'll be finding out in this programme, laughter is good for you. In fact, laughter is often called the best medicine.
And it seems that's really true, medically speaking. Laughing releases anti-stress endorphins into the body, and there's evidence that people who laugh recover more quickly from illness, including COVID.
Laughing is an essential part of what makes us human. Babies cry straight from birth, but the next sound they make, often as young as 2 or 3 months, is laughter.
And who can hear a baby laugh without laughing themselves? Laughter is catching.
But before we start tickling our funny bones, I have a quiz question for you, Neil, and it's no laughing matter. Laughter can be a serious business. In fact, there's a scientific field of study into laughter and its effects on the human body. But what is this study called? Is it A, giglology, B, gelotology, or C, graphology?
Did you make those words up, Sam? They sound a bit funny to me. I'll say the study of laughter is called B, gelotology.
Okay, Neil, but you'll be laughing on the other side of your face if you're wrong. Anyway, we'll find out the correct answer later in the programme.
Someone who's an expert in the study of laughing, whatever it's called, is cognitive neuroscientist Professor Sophie Scott. Here she explains to David Edmonds, presenter of BBC World Service programme The Big Idea, exactly how a laugh is produced.
Laughing is a variation of breathing. Like breathing, it involves the rib cage.
When you laugh, you get these very, very large, very fast contractions of the rib cage. And it's a very primitive way of making a sound. So you're really just squeezing air out in big bouts. Each of those individual squeezes gives you a ha sound.
The ha-ha sound you make when you laugh comes from your rib cage, a structure made of bones, called ribs, in your chest which protects the heart and lungs. The rib cage works like a drum to amplify a laugh.
It's the reason why jokes are sometimes called rib ticklers.
Professor Scott calls this a very primitive way of making sounds because it's simple, natural, and essentially human.
The word primitive can be used to describe anything relating to the basic way humans lived at their early stages of development, before money, machines, or writing were invented.
Primitive human noises like crying and laughing link to a universal human experience. And this can be seen in the large number of words we use to talk about them. In English, chuckle, giggle, chortle, cackle and guffaw all describe different types of laughter.
Right, so how would you describe a giggle, Sam?
I'd say a giggle is laughing in a quiet but uncontrolled way, like a child who finds something very funny or feels embarrassed.
Unlike a guffaw, which is when you blast out a very loud laugh, often at something stupid or rude someone has said.
But humans aren't the only animals to laugh. We belong to the same family as other primates like chimpanzees, gorillas and orangutans, all of whom laugh.
Even rats tickle each other and make squeaky noises like laughter when they play. Here's Professor Scott again to take up the story for BBC World Service programme The Big Idea.
Play is a very important behaviour for mammals. All mammals play when they're juveniles and some mammals play their whole lives. And laughter is a sort of an invitation to play. It's a sign that you're playing.
Professor Scott says laughter is an important social tool for all mammals. Animals, including humans, dogs and whales, which give birth to live young rather than laying eggs, and who feed their young with milk.
By laughing, young mammals, sometimes called juveniles, signal that they want to play, and young rats who don't laugh back are more likely to get a bite than a giggle, and a rat bite is nothing to laugh about.
What a lot of facts we've learnt about laughter, Neil.
Yes, we could almost be experts on laughter. Guffologists, isn't that what you called them, Sam?
Ah, yes. In my quiz question, I asked you to name the scientific study of laughter and its effects on the body.
I'm almost certain it's not giglology or guffology, so the answer must be...
gelotology, the correct answer. Well done, Neil. I knew you were good for a laugh.
OK, let's recap the vocabulary from the programme before you think up any more terrible jokes. First, we had rib cage, the structure in your chest which is made of ribs and produces the sound of laughter.
The adjective primitive relates to the simple, natural way humans lived in their early stages of development.
There are different types of laughter, including giggles, childlike laughter in a quiet but uncontrolled way.
And guffaws when you laugh out loud, often at something someone has said.
Mammals are animals, including humans, which give birth to live young and feed them with milk.
And finally, a young animal which is not fully grown can be called a juvenile.
Well, it's been a laugh a minute, Sam, but unfortunately our 6 minutes are up.
Join us again soon for more trending topics, useful vocabulary, and who knows, maybe some terrible jokes here at 6 Minute English. Bye for now.
Goodbye.
6 Minute English.
From BBC Learning English.